Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the absolute most fascinating and frankly counterintuitive mysteries in modern psychiatric science. We are talking about the psilocybin bad trip. Now, you've probably heard all the terrifying anecdotes, right? Psychedelic experiences just going completely off the rails. But what actually happens when researchers sit down and crunch the hard numbers on these terrifying encounters? Well, back in 2017, a really rigorous study out of Johns Hopkins University did exactly that. And honestly, what they found completely flips how we think about psychological distress and long-term well-being. So grab a seat and get ready because we are going to break down this incredible data step by step.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We're following the exact structure of that Johns Hopkins study. First, introduction to psilocybin. Second, survey methods and demographics. Third, qualitative ratings and meaning. Fourth, duration and coping strategies. Fifth, acute risks and enduring problems. And finally, number 6, discussion and future research. Let's get to it.
Section 1. Introduction to psilocybin. So what exactly are we dealing with here?
Psilocybin is the principal psychoactive compound found in what most of us just call magic mushrooms. Now, humans have been using this stuff for literally millennia, mostly in religious or spiritual settings. From a purely chemical standpoint, psilocybin actually has very low physiological toxicity. That means it's physically pretty safe for your organs, and it's not known to cause compulsive drug seeking or addiction. But mentally, that's a whole different story. It is deeply, intensely powerful on a psychological level, and it is entirely capable of producing acute, severe, and deeply distressing adverse psychological reactions. This is what we colloquially call a bad trip, and it's the exact phenomenon this study was designed to figure out.
And right here is the paradox that absolutely hooked the researchers. On one hand, we see these acute, distressing symptoms, right? Profound fear, terrible anxiety, people occasionally putting themselves in physical danger or even ending up in the ER. Yet, at the exact same time, we see these enduring effects that result in profound, positive, therapeutic outcomes. I mean, think about that. How on earth can an experience defined by absolute terror actually lead to long-lasting positive meaning in a person's life?
Section 2. Survey methods and demographics. Let's look at who actually took this survey.
The researchers managed to collect usable data from nearly 2,000 individuals. Demographically, the average age was around 30, and the group was predominantly male and white. But here is the absolutely crucial detail to pay attention to: lifetime psilocybin use. A massive 93% of these folks had used it more than twice, with the median sitting right around 6 to 10 times. So we're not talking about naive rookies who accidentally took too much and had a scary time. These are highly experienced users. And the researchers asked them to fill out this massive survey focusing entirely on their single worst, most psychologically difficult psilocybin experience ever.
So, what did it take to trigger these worst-case scenarios? A median dose of exactly 4 grams of dried mushrooms. To put that into perspective, 4 grams is considered a moderately high dose. It equates to roughly 25 milligrams of pure psilocybin. And what's really fascinating is that 36% of these participants explicitly said they were intentionally trying to take a larger than usual dose for this specific session. They deliberately pushed the envelope and, well, the envelope pushed back.
Section 3. Qualitative ratings and meaning. How did they actually evaluate the trip looking back?
Now, this is where the data gets incredibly striking. When researchers asked how difficult the experience was, a whopping 39% rated this bad trip as among the top 5 most difficult experiences of their entire lives. Some even said it was the absolute hardest thing they had ever been through. But when asked how personally meaningful the experience was, the results basically mirror the difficulty. 34% of these exact same people rated this terrifying, horrible event as among the top 5 most personally meaningful experiences of their lives. It's just an unbelievable mirroring of extreme struggle and extreme meaning.
And if that wasn't surprising enough, check this out. When asked point blank, did you benefit from the challenging portions of your session? A staggering 84% of participants said yes. 84%! Despite enduring just sheer panic, fear, and profound psychological struggle, stuff that literally ranked among the hardest things they'd ever faced, the vast majority walked away feeling they had gained something deeply valuable from the ordeal.
To understand why, the researchers ran a multiple regression analysis, and they uncovered a really crucial dynamic. The intensity of the peak difficulty actually directly correlates with meaning. Basically, the harder the peak of the trip, the more meaningful it became later on. However, the duration of the difficulty had the exact opposite effect.
If the struggle just dragged on and on for hours, the long-term well-being actually decreased. So, a sharp, intense challenge yields growth, but a prolonged grinding panic, that just diminishes it.
Section 4. Duration and coping strategies. How long do these trips last, and what actually helped?
Looking at the durations rated by the participants, it's clear we are not talking about brief, passing flashes of panic. For 40% of the participants, the hardest, most brutal part of the experience lasted over 2 hours. And for nearly 10% of them, the difficult portion lasted the entire duration of the session. Now, keep in mind, time dilation is a really common effect of classic psychedelics. So when your sense of time is completely warped, a 2-hour panic attack can subjectively feel like an absolute eternity.
So naturally, people tried to make it stop. But when we look at the strategies attempted versus the strategies that actually helped, there is a massive gap. The most common things people tried were attempting to calm their mind or changing their physical location. But here's the catch. Every single strategy was only modestly effective. The data shows that once a really challenging experience sets in, it is incredibly difficult to just turn it off.
But, while you might not be able to easily stop a bad trip once it starts, the data tells us exactly what causes them in the first place. It comes down to what we call set and setting, your mindset and your physical environment. As you'd expect, a higher dose predictably increased both the difficulty and the duration. But look at what actually decreased the severity, going into it with a conducive emotional state, being in a physically comfortable setting, and having social support. Literally, your mood and your environment directly dictate how hard and how long the bad trip will be. Section 5. Acute risks and enduring problems. We have to talk about the real dangers. It's really important to impartially report that in uncontrolled environments, psilocybin can pose very real, acute physical risks. 11% of respondents reported putting themselves or others at risk of physical harm during their worst trip. 2.6% behaved in a physically aggressive or violent manner, and 2.7% actually had to receive medical help, often winding up in an emergency room. When someone loses touch with reality in an unsupportive environment, the physical dangers are, well, statistically significant. And those risks don't always just magically disappear when the drug wears off. Looking at enduring psychological effects lasting over a year, 7.6% of people actually had to seek professional psychiatric treatment for symptoms they attributed directly to the bad trip. The researchers also recorded 3 specific cases associated with the onset of enduring psychotic symptoms like schizophrenia and 3 cases of attempted suicide following the experience. But paradoxically, and this really highlights just how wildly complex this substance is, the exact same analysis found 6 cases where pre-existing suicidal thoughts entirely went away after the trip. The stakes here, both positive and negative, are just incredibly high.
Section 6. Discussion and future research. So, what does all of this actually mean for us moving forward?
Well, the absolute most vital takeaway is captured perfectly right here by the researchers. The incidence of risky behavior or enduring psychological distress is extremely low when psilocybin is given in laboratory studies to screened, prepared, and supported participants. Remember, the data we've been looking at mostly represents the worst-case scenarios of people taking mushrooms out in the wild, often with zero preparation and no sober guide to keep them safe. This reveals such a stark contrast. Over on the left, in the uncontrolled settings of the survey respondents, where you have unknown dosages, people mixing substances, and no sober guides, that's where the acute risks really hide. But on the right, in controlled clinical research, with careful screening, a prepared room, and trained guides, the incidence of these terrible risks drops dramatically. So the risks highlighted in this survey are largely a product of the chaotic environment, not necessarily an inherent, unavoidable feature of the substance itself. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. As modern science continues to unlock the incredible therapeutic power of psychedelics, how do we as a society actually harness the profound, enduring benefits of these deeply difficult experiences while simultaneously safeguarding individuals against the very real, very physical dangers of uncontrolled use? It's an incredibly fine line between a traumatic ordeal and a completely life-changing psychological breakthrough. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and as always, stay curious.